YouTube Ozick going the Goat House is back. After week 13 of college football, I have my updated rankings. Obviously, some changes with Oregon going down to Arizona State, among other games there. So we'll go through it 25-1, and we'll talk about the potential college football playoff and what the outcome would be. You can see on the screen we got some big movers in a positive way, negative way. We'll go over those teams. And throughout the rankings here, I will talk about where teams were last week, so how much they moved. And I explain why each team is ranked where they are every single week. Before we get started, we have a 40K subscriber goal. We have more than just college football content here. We got NFL content as well. Full coverage in the NFL season, but in the offseason, full coverage of free agency and the draft as well. So please subscribe. Join us for all that. Click that like button. Check us out on Twitter at GoatHouseNFL. Always tweeting about college football, NFL, and the NFL draft. But back to the rankings. Starting off at number 25, so you can see who dropped out, A&M and SMU. A&M, I think, when it's all said and done, I think they're a top 25 team, but they just don't have the resume. They have the schedule, but they haven't really beat any solid teams that gets them a pass when having 4 losses. But I think a pretty good team, just a very tough schedule. 25 is going to be Navy. I was actually surprised they beat SMU. I was thinking SMU was going to win that game. And it was kind of back and forth for a while, but then Navy pulled it off in the end. It really came down to the end, too. SMU had a few chances. I didn't like that. The final play, it was a low percentage throw, but Navy holds on. After a very disappointing game against Notre Dame, they looked really sloppy. I know that's a tough opponent, but, they end up pulling off the SMU game. So they make their way back up 25, with the only losses being Memphis and Notre Dame, so pretty good. The only 4-loss team in my whole rankings is the newly ranked USC Trojans at number 24. Pac-12. I have a new level of respect for the Pac-12. I know this. There's no free win in the Pac-12. It is very underrated. And it's just, you have to play your best ball every single week, and that's why I like the Pac-12. There's so many other conferences that I think are overrated, and people forget that there's a lot of free wins. And or some teams only play the bad teams from the conference. It's all over the place in college football, but not the Pac-12. Full with talented teams, getting better each year. USC has that big-time win over Utah, and I know there were some injured players on Utah, but USC still has that win. Tough schedule, and like I said, that Pac-12 is pretty impressive. So that, looking at that resume, and mainly being that Utah win, that kind of gets USC to number 24 there. They were not ranked last week. 23 is Oklahoma State. They were at 25 last week. I think the college football playoff committee values their losses mainly, and I'm not going to really value losses all that much. There is a team that I think has a valuable loss, and for different reasons that polls and committees think. But Oklahoma State, tough schedule. They did beat some solid teams, but they don't have the best wins, that to get them any higher than this, in my opinion, especially while having 3 losses. A good team. They're getting better each week. They have a tough game against Oklahoma this week. That's going to be a good one. A lot on the line there, mainly for the Sooners. But yeah, Oklahoma State, good losses, I guess. That's what again, I think the committee overvalues that a little bit just based on who they play. But either way, Oklahoma State's an impressive team. They are 25-23 now in this week's ranking for me. And Appalachian State is 22. They were 24 last week. Only lost to Georgia Southern. That's a tough blow. They do have pretty impressive wins. North Carolina, South Carolina, staying strong. And a team that's getting better, every step of the way, too. So Appalachian State is number 22. They were number 24 last week. Number 21 is Boise State. They were 22 last week, so a move one spot. They're moving up one spot here. Pretty impressive win against Utah State. Nothing you really could overreact from. You got 2 teams dropping out. That helps them move up a spot there. And coming in number 20, staying at number 20, is Iowa. Again, I think the committee will probably have them higher just because who they lost to, but at the end of the day, for me, their losses, you got to respect the schedule, I guess, but there is a lot of free wins there in the Big Ten, and they don't have any, wins that are going to, besides Minnesota, which I thought was a sloppy game for both teams, they don't have any other wins that are going to make me boost them higher than 20. 20 is a pretty good rank for a team with 3 losses, and that's, high enough for me. Number 19, Cincinnati. I actually had them at 18 last week. They're down 1 spot. Temple's a pretty good win. So it's not really what they did this week. It's more of what this other team did. that I'm moving up. But Cincinnati has been close with some lower level teams, I thought, in the past, so that kind of played a part too. And once again, I think, the committee finally swapped Memphis and Cincinnati. I've had Memphis over Cincinnati the whole time because of the resume, and they randomly swapped it, and they're starting to realize that was last week. We'll see if anything changes this week. But I think, they were really overvalued that they lost to Ohio State, who was their number one and number two. But they lost 42-0. I mean, there's not too much value in that. Yeah, you respect them for playing Ohio State, but I never really valued that super high. Number 18, a team I want to put higher, but it's tough to put higher with 3 losses. It's Virginia Tech, and you see them under the big movers. They're on the big move up. They were at 23 for me. They're at 18 now, even with 3 losses. This team is much better than their record will show. You looking at what they've done. This is one of those teams where you wish the season can start over and they can. And that's not how it works, obviously, but they make the quarterback change. Hendon Hooker comes in. He looks excellent. And they have that 6 overtime win against North Carolina, which I think changed the team. The energy, the momentum, the defense seems a lot better. They go into Notre Dame. Hendon Hooker's hurt. So that they play Patterson, which I think, Hooker's the better quarterback. And they lost Notre Dame on a final game-winning drive. They lost by 1 point. So you could make the case that if Hooker was in, they would have won. I think it did throw off Notre Dame with the game planning aspect with Patterson in, but with a much better quarterback, VTech could have won that game, and they stuck in there with Notre Dame. At that point, I'm thinking, wow, man, Notre Dame really struggling this year. They almost lost to Virginia Tech. It took a game-winning drive, but it turns out that Virginia Tech's a heck of a football team, and they've been winning since then. They go and play a pretty darn good Pittsburgh team and shut them out. Very impressive team. They got their quarterback. The whole team has a lot of energy and momentum. They're well coached right now. They're on another level. Their only loss with their true identity was the Notre Dame game without their starting quarterback and a 1-point win for Notre Dame on a last-second drive. This team can play. And with the win over Virginia, which I expect, and Virginia's not a bad team either, they will play Clemson in the ACC championship game, and that is no cakewalk. That is no cakewalk for Clemson. VTech team, obviously as we sit, I would, most likely pick Clemson as everyone would, but VTech team's a pretty good team. It's a pretty darn good team here, and they are way better than their record shows, that is for sure. So I move them up to 18. I guess those are good losses to have, ones that really don't mean much because that really wasn't your true team then, but they're still there. You can't wipe them off completely, but looking at losing to Boston College week 1 and losing to Duke, if that happened again, which I know that's not how it works, they would easily win those games. So it kind of hurts at the same time of being, got to be excited about Virginia Tech football right now and where it's heading. 17 is the Memphis Tigers. They got a pretty good resume, compared to the other AAC teams. The win over Navy, some other solid wins, the win over SMU. Pretty good football team here, and they're rolling right now. I've had them at 17 for a while. It's tough to move them up ahead of some of the teams in the top 16. I think if any of those teams, for the most part, any of the teams, that we're going to talk about shortly here, lose at any given time, then Memphis can move ahead of those teams. But they have a shot at a pretty good bowl game, obviously, but it's still that AAC is up for grabs still, but they got to keep rolling. Number 16 is Wisconsin. They will remain at 16 as well. Really no reason to move them up. Wisconsin, the thing with them, for a team like Wisconsin, a team that's well in the top 25, I should see obvious improvement throughout the year. That's how any team up here, even if you lose, even if some teams lose to good teams, you should see improvement. It should be obvious because the season goes on. I don't think I can't say that about Wisconsin. I felt way better about them earlier in the year than where they're at now. I think the defense is much better earlier in the year. The offense is about the same. I guess they're scoring a little more, but their defense was top notch early in the year. I guess that comes with that non-conference schedule and then a lot of free wins in the Big Ten, and then their losses are from the tough teams in the Big Ten. But what keeps them down at 16 and why teams like, we haven't seen Michigan yet, who Wisconsin handled pretty well. And I'm usually, if a team has the same record, I like the head-to-head a lot. So it's rare for me to have a team that lost that head-to-head with the same record ahead of them. But the reason is that Illinois lost. Even though Illinois is playing pretty decent right now, and they're better than they have been, that is still a tough loss. And that is really what keeps them down here. But still, number 16 is a pretty good rank there. 15 is a 3-loss team at Auburn. Obviously, a really good team. I think one of the better defenses in the country when it's all said and done. They put up fights with some other good teams, even if they lost to them. So I guess you consider those good losses. I'm not going to overreact from valuable losses. There's still a team I want to talk about that I've talked about every week. So if you've been listening, that has, to me, in my opinion, what should be a good loss. But Auburn, they have their good wins too. Beating Oregon's a very solid win in week 1. Like I said, I like this defense. It's a talented team, better than their record shows. Just playing in the SEC is what puts them at 15, really, in that record. 14 is Notre Dame. They're going to stay right with it. So a lot of staying put. Auburn was at 15 last week, and Notre Dame still at 14. A dominant win over Boston College, but it's Boston College. That's what it should be. I think Notre Dame's getting better, actually, the last few weeks. It's just really tough to tell because they haven't really played much. Navy I thought would be a little closer. I mean, they're ranked. But, yeah, Notre Dame's really good at home. We know that. So that's really no surprise there. We're not learning anything new. Number 13, staying at 13. It is tough not moving them up because Michigan, I can say without a doubt, has gotten better since their rough, even wins. They had rough wins early in the year, and then they have the rough losses. I can respect this Michigan schedule, too, because they have a non-conference like Notre Dame, and they're playing like all those good Big Ten teams. A lot of the Big Ten teams are playing some here and there, maybe just one even, and they have those free win Big Ten teams, which there's a lot of. So you got to respect Michigan there. And they're getting better. They're getting better. Definitely better since they lost to Wisconsin. I'd say probably better since they lost to Penn State by a touchdown. But they're at 13 right now. Still, even though where I'm saying they've gotten better, have they actually really played anybody besides Notre Dame? Not really there. But still, overall, look at the resume. They have that Notre Dame game. They have all the Big Ten teams. They still have to play Ohio State. So Michigan, I respect their schedule. They're at 13. Penn State is at 12. Moving down 1 for Ohio State loss. They actually look ugly at first. They actually put up a fight. Thought it was just sloppy on both sides. Tough to move them below Michigan. I do think Michigan's getting better while Penn State, you can't say they're getting worse, but it almost looks that way because they're losing. Lost to Minnesota was sloppy. Then they lose to Ohio State. But so the head-to-head is the difference, because where it's back and forth there and they're losing some good teams, it's the difference. They don't have that Illinois loss that Wisconsin has. So that's what keeps Penn State one ahead of Michigan there. But, yeah, the Big Ten, I think there's a huge, regardless of what the score ended up being, I think there's a huge, huge gap between Ohio State and the rest of the teams. We just don't see, it's almost like we don't see enough of some of these Big Ten teams. We see them play the weaker non-conference, minus Michigan and the downpour against Notre Dame, and then they kind of just beat up on each other. Have sloppy games against each other, and then they, have those several free wins in the Big Ten, which a team like Michigan doesn't have a whole bunch of them, so that's why I respect them a lot here for this year. So that's why a team like Oregon is ahead of them. No free wins in the Pac-12, a lot of games that can go either way. Washington was a pretty good team earlier in the year when they played them, it's tough losing to Arizona State. And Arizona State won't match, their record. Arizona State's a pretty good football team. It's still a bad loss and a crucial one in that situation. I still think this Oregon team's very talented. And it'll show even in the Arizona State game. It's 24-7. It looks like that's going to be the final, somewhere around there, maybe even more for Arizona State. But the talent that Oregon has overall, they burst, just because how talented they are, and they're only down by 3 just like that. They can't pull it off because the mistakes they made early on. But the reason they were able to come back that easy, because they're just plain and simple the better team, but they lost, and that's why they're down from number 7 to number 11. That's a tough loss. I don't think anyway, I know there's very little to 0% chance they get in the playoff now. They'll have a chance to play Utah in that Pac-12 title, but I just don't see any way they can get in. There has to be a complete meltdown across the country here. But so very, very unlikely to 0% chance there. They're at 11. That's a tough loss there. Baylor's at number 10, moving up 2 spots. It's just still a shame they lost that Oklahoma game. The main reason they're up 2 spots, Oregon loses, Penn State loses. That's really it. Nothing that they did. They beat Texas, as they should. A little messy over there, and that's just really it. Mainly because the other teams lost. They have some solid wins, and then 1 loss, obviously, compared to the other teams' 2 losses. This is really why they're at number 10. At number 9, moving up 1 spot, is Minnesota. When it's all said and done, you take away the records, the resume, is Minnesota number 9 team? I'd say probably not, but a lot factors in the body of work, how they played. I can't make assumption for the most part. I have identities on teams, so some teams I put higher just because I know they're better, but they'll go to number 9. The win over Penn State is big time. The loss to Iowa was tough. I thought both teams played pretty sloppy, but Minnesota's a pretty well-balanced team. They'll have a tough game this week against Wisconsin, so that could be interesting, depending on where they move to. Either team. It's going to be interesting. Wisconsin can fall out of that column of teams there if they lose. Minnesota can drop to the bottom and Wisconsin come to the top if Wisconsin wins. So, yeah, Minnesota, pretty impressive year. They have one of those weaker schedules up to this point. They got to play Wisconsin this week from the Big Ten. But they are at number 9. One-loss team, win over Penn State. You can't have any of these teams that are right below them ahead of them. You just can't, in my opinion. Number 8, so that's just kind of where it comes up. I know the identity of the team. Florida has more losses than a team like Minnesota, like Baylor. There's no doubt in my mind the Florida Gators are a better team than those two teams that have one loss. They would have no problem playing them if they somehow played them in a bowl game. If they were healthy for the most part, both teams. That's why Florida's at 8. They have the resume, too. They have good wins. They have... they played tough teams. They had the tough schedule, much tougher schedule than those Big Ten, like Minnesota, I should say. That's cool I'm kind of comparing to. And Baylor, the Big 12. Not really thrilled with the Big 12 either. Florida's just better, plain and simple. And I'm able to put them at 8 even with the 2 losses because of that. And again, an impressive resume. It's tough. It's tough having Oklahoma at 7. But that Baylor win is what keeps them up here and keeps them, I guess, moving up here. They were at 8 last week. We saw Florida go from 9 to 8. We saw Oklahoma go from 8 to 7. Scary, tight win against TCU. Rough call at the end, too. Rough spot, I should say. TCU pressure got another shot, but there was nothing guaranteed that they're going to win the game. A little sloppy from Hurts again. Oklahoma's better than TCU, plain and simple. It just shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that close. But that Baylor win keeps them up. It's a great win. Kansas State loss is a little tough, but they're at number 7. I'm hesitant to say they're actually number 7 best team when they take away the record when it's all said and done. But I don't know if there's enough teams. Is there really? I think Florida beat them head to head, but kind of comparing Florida to Minnesota and Baylor, I said that, but I can't put Florida ahead of Oklahoma. Oklahoma has that Baylor win, that comeback win. That was big time for them. So Oklahoma gets a slight edge there with 1 loss. Number 6, we're actually going to reveal my kind of the playoff outlook here. And I actually swapped 5 and 6. The top 4 stay the same. I swapped 5 and 6. Utah is up to number 5. Bama is down to number 6. That was pretty much... It was very, very tight last week when I had Utah 6 and Bama 5. I was close to moving Utah up. And this week, it's almost like having a bye week. Alabama plays West Carolina, and Utah, they play a lower-level Pac-12 team, but they're able to stay dominant in the Pac-12 with no free wins, and they're absolutely executing down the line here. A very well-balanced team, well-rounded team. I'm able to move them up that spot. And this is the team, I've been explaining it for weeks and weeks. This is the team that has the most valuable loss in the country, Utah, to me. I don't care if you played a top 2 team and lost to them, unless something weird happened. It was very, very tight. They lost at the end of the day. Utah played USC. That's who they lost to. Their quarterback, Tyler Huntley, who's playing out of his mind, got hurt in that game. And Zach Moss, their star running back, was out very early in that game. So that, to me, a game I think they would have won if they were healthy, is a good loss. They're not, but it almost feels like this team's undefeated. They're getting better and better. Very well-rounded. I like the Utah Utes a lot. They'll still have a tough task against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. It's a must-win. So I move them ahead. You could argue Bama could beat them head-to-head. You look at Bama's resume. They don't have the most impressive wins. They have an impressive loss, I guess, against LSU, if that's what you want to call it. But they don't have the most impressive wins. What we're just going off of here is they're a very talented team. They have NFL draft, first-round NFL talent everywhere. It's a very talented team. Yeah, they may beat Utah one-on-one even without Tua. That would probably be a good game, really. But Utah, to me, has that good loss, and they've been very, very impressive. They're number 5. And if they win the Pac-12, and if, say LSU beats Georgia, then they can squeeze in there. Georgia comes in at 4 still. They beat Texas A&M, who is better than their record shows. A&M put up a little bit of fight. You see it's kind of a downpour. It's a little messy out there early. That's when I thought Georgia should have this one no problem. They should actually have really no problem in that game. Because it turns into a running game. It turns into a running game and kind of the short passing game, just who's more accurate in those crucial throwing situations. And all that points towards Georgia by a wide margin, but they kind of kept A&M in the game. Fromm was a little off. Georgia got to rely on their run game a little too much, and it's not just this game. So a little sloppy. Interesting call at the end to the non-pass interference. I thought A&M should have had a shot, but at the end of the day, Georgia outplayed them. So is Georgia actually a top 4 team in the country when it's all said and done? You take away the resume. That's actually something you can definitely debate. I think Utah and Georgia would be a heck of a game, really. But Georgia has the resume. They have the win over Notre Dame. They have the win over Auburn. They have the win over Florida. And they have the win over A&M, which I think is a good win. Tough loss against South Carolina, obviously. But they have the resume. They're at number 4. I think they've gotten a little bit better. Even since, beating Notre Dame. I think they've gotten better since then. And then number 3 is Clemson. Yeah, they don't have the resume, but people are sleeping on this defense. I think this very well could be the top defense in the country. Even losing their whole front 4, and the offense will get better as season goes on. I say it every week. It seems like people forget this too. People always forget for some reason. Clemson looks a little shaky in the season. Early and mid season. They have their hiccups here and there, even though they win. And then come playoff time, they're dominant. Whether they win the national championship or not, last year obviously they did, they're dominant. And people forget that. So I think they'll be ready. But that Virginia Tech game, if they play Virginia Tech, which I expect them to in the ACC championship game, that's no cakewalk. Virginia Tech's a heck of a team. And that'll be interesting for Clemson. They got to be the favorite, as they should be. Number 2 is Ohio State. They beat Penn State. Looked like it was going to be a beating, pretty much. Some mistakes. I don't like the sloppy mistakes. Teams like LSU don't really have that in those types of situations to let teams back in the game. LSU just has the better resume, has been more dominant. I'd say Ohio State's defense has been better, but they have not played anywhere near the offenses that LSU has played. They'll have a test against Michigan. I think they're just the better team. They have the talent. Other people say the opposite. People say Ohio State has the best resume, or even people that say that Ohio State should be number 2 behind LSU. They'll still stand by their resume. I think Ohio State's number 2 because their talent and their execution. I'm not a huge fan of their resume, honestly. Playing a lot of the free win teams in the Big Ten, it's really not their fault. They're number 2 because they're talented. They're talented. They got the best pass rusher in the league, in the nation. They got possibly the best quarterback. I'd probably go to Joe Burrow right now. But they got talent everywhere. They got weapons on offense. They're a very talented team. That's why they're at number 2 for me. And they're undefeated. And LSU is number 1, by far the best resume. They got the Heisman front runner. They have the weapons at running back, receiver. Blown away by the receiver duo. Justin Jefferson should be a first-round pick this year. Jamar Chase will be the first receiver off the board in 2020. And the defense has playmakers and game changers, but they could do a little better job, making some stops. But it does seem like a lot of the teams score most of their points when LSU's got a big lead and it's kind of garbage time, which we even see in the NFL that happens to the best defenses. Not that LSU has the best defense, they're really not even close. I think it's Ohio State and Clemson for the most part there. Utah is a sneaky one there. But yeah, I think people look too much into that. They're killing Ole Miss, they're up big, and Ole Miss is getting fancy with their freshman quarterback, and the game feels like it's over. So I think people look too much in the statistics, and LSU has also played some really good SEC teams. But the defense will have to step up, in the playoff. But I like this LSU team a lot. We'll say if this playoff started today, if this was the 4, LSU would beat Georgia. I think Ohio State, Clemson, I keep changing my mind on every week. Ohio State's been the better team this year. You could argue if they have more talent either way, but something about Clemson and playoff time just gets me. So I'd actually, at this moment, possibly take, that would be one hell of a game. Probably take Clemson, but I'd take LSU to win it all. But if everything pans out, it should be the same 1, 2, 3 in that order, and Utah should be number 4 if they beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. So they should be in that game. I think Utah would, going off matchup, not going off, who the teams are and where they're ranked. Utah, I think, would put up a fight matchup-wise with a team like Clemson, a team like Ohio State. I don't know if they match up well with LSU in the first round. they're 1 versus 4, which would most likely be the case. So that's a little tough, but I wouldn't rule them out. Very well-rounded team, very underrated team. But back to my rankings. Those are my rankings there for this week. Heading into week 4, week 14, a lot of big games this week. Obviously, the Iron Bowl, Ohio State, Michigan, a lot of good games. We'll go over my picks, a lot of tough ones to pick. That'll be later today, which is Monday the 25th. We always do this video on every Monday. So, yeah, again, those are my rankings. That's going to do it for this one, though. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Plenty of NFL videos on the channel and more to come as well. If you didn't know, please subscribe. Trying to get to that 40K goal. That's going to do it for this one, though. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.